Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cyber Houston series brought to you by Cyber Houston. As a quick reminder, we're going to talk about a lot of things today. None of them necessarily reflect the opinion of our employers, and nothing is intended to be 100% comprehensive in securing your environment, network, or data. Always consult with trained professionals when building your cybersecurity strategy. Cyber Houston is a nonprofit initiative created by business and community leaders to address the growing risks and challenges of cybersecurity. We've worked with industry experts to publish playbooks, guidelines, and frameworks that are accessible to organizations of all sizes. You can learn more about our mission, resources, and upcoming events at cyberhouston.org. So today we're going to jump into Secure Access Service Edge, sometimes known as SASE. And maybe people have different pronunciations for it, but that's what I'm going to call it today. And it's really interesting. You know, we live in a world where people, applications, devices, and data are really scattered across homes, offices, airports, hotels, coffee shops. People simply work differently. COVID helped to create this with our people and our devices. But lately, cloud computing, software as a service, SaaS, has fundamentally changed the location of our apps and our data. And SASE is really a powerful response to the new reality of securing our data, our applications, our people. And I'm just going to give you some high-end thoughts that I have about the topic. Number one, don't make things overcomplicated. The intent of SASE is to simplify and to secure. It's a new security pattern, and it shifts our security stack from inside of your network into the cloud. And it really combines networking and security into a cloud-based service. It makes it easier and safer for your employees to access company resources from anywhere. One of the key prerequisites I think about, and I think Andy and Pierluigi would agree, a prerequisite that's key for all of this to work is SD-WAN. You really need that for SASE to work well. Also, another thing at a high level, there's tons of different use cases for what we're protecting, how we're protecting it. And as you develop those requirements, understand you will benefit from a single vendor environment. There's so much going on today with ML and AI that we can no longer split the different capabilities of SASE across several vendors and achieve the true power of the machine learning and artificial intelligence that they're going to bake into these solutions. And really at its heart, if we think about what we do in computing, we have devices. They're going to be managed or unmanaged. And maybe you could think about it as being trusted or untrusted. We have data. The data could live in the cloud. It could live on-prem. And that's really what we're protecting. And we have to stop data loss, right? When you think about data loss, too, it goes in two directions. So something to think about would be, I don't want my people uploading sensitive data to untrusted sites, but I also don't want people accessing data through SaaS with an untrusted device. And now they're pulling real data from a trusted location down to an untrusted device. So that's kind of the thinking I like to engage in when I do consider devices, identities, data, the applications themselves. I mean, the apps could be company managed SaaS, it could be unmanaged SaaS, or it could be private data that still lives in your on-premise data center. And you always need to be considerate of that data flow. When you're thinking about requirements, what you're protecting and how you want to protect it, the data could be flowing uphill, it could be flowing downhill, and there's different levels of trust between your apps and your devices. So it can really become a complicated matrix. And if you build it out in total, you could have 28, maybe even 30 different use cases that you bring to bear with your vendors when you ask them to highlight the features and capabilities that can help protect your institution. I know I just said a lot, and I do want to end my piece by saying we're being sold a lot of fallacies out there. I kind of, in general, I'm a little bit of a pundit when it comes to what salesmen tell us. I have a personal opinion that we rarely buy what we're sold. And I view zero trust and SASE kind of through the same lens, insofar as it's a journey. It's not a switch. It's not a product. And with that last statement in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Pierluigi.
I don't know that I agree with the last statement. There is not a product. There are certain things that are certainly not a product, like zero trust. I've literally seen companies out in conferences saying, we sell zero trust. It's not something you can sell. Zero trust is a journey, it's a philosophy, it's a way of doing things, right? And it's way that wasn't even invented yesterday, by the way. The first to talk about zero trust was a PhD student from Sweden in 1998. That was the first time that the word zero trust was used. Most of us in the industry have used the idea of zero trust forever, right? Except that it was when in the year 2000, the early years of the network security, zero trust was seen as a nuisance. Let me do my thing, open up everything. It's trusted, right? Today, finally, the industry is corrupt, and we understand that there is no such thing as a trusted environment. There is no such thing as a trusted sender. There is no such thing as a trusted server, because you don't know what happened in the last 2 hours since you used it last time, right? Because your friend could have had his computer hacked, and the email you're receiving is not from him. You can't just whitelist somebody because you know him. But this is just the idea in general with zero trust. More in particular in the networking environment, zero trust for a workstation could mean that we need to stop talking about EDR, because we've been talking about EDR for too long, and they're completely useless in my opinion, and I say it in front of anybody. Technology, it's a technology that means I gave up everything. Something is going to come, is going to cross the barrier. Maybe later, 3 hours later, I will detect it, and that's not acceptable. There are better technologies. We are not talking about those today, but there are with the technologies on the workstations that can do zero trust at the workstation level very well. In terms of SASE or SASE, if you don't mind bringing up the slide, please. There is an architecture. Gartner in 2019, I believe it was July 2019, published a paper that is now available online pretty much everywhere, where they defined what SASE has to be. And they defined it into two sections. One is the networking, one is the security. And they basically said, you cannot have one without the other. They're not two things that you do separately. You don't just buy like you used to. You buy the MPLS, you buy the internet, then you plug in a firewall, and you're done. No, you cannot. With the modern architecture, especially after COVID and the open world we live in, the whole thing needs to be considered and thought of as one, together. You are doing networking in a secure way. You're doing security over the network and beyond. You said it correctly. People work from everywhere. You cannot have a rigid architecture, but at the same time, you need to do it well integrated. In fact, one of the conclusions that Gartner came up with was you cannot use 20 different vendors, because you are going to create a puzzle that doesn't fit, and something is going to break. And when something breaks, you do not know where to reach. Instead, these solutions need to be sold by one vendor that creates them from the bottom up, through the SD-WAN, WAN optimization, all the things that I'm not going to read the slide. It's there for 5 minutes, so people can read it. It's important that what's on the left, which is the networking side, and what's on the right, which is the security side, need to be assessed and addressed together as one. You can, I'll give you a critic of some companies of that. There are companies that claim they have SASE, or SASE, again, and when you go and analyze what they do, is they have a secure web gateway and nothing else. Right? And what they give you a software to install on the workstations. And I keep telling my prospects and my clients, this concept has been around for 20 years. There was a company that's still around. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to do publicity here. They invented this concept before we were calling it anything, where you have a software on your PC and you connect to something in the cloud as your proxy, right? That's not SASE. SASE is a lot more than that. It's everything that's on the screen today. And it's especially, you need to be sure that you don't need to go plugging around 20 different SD-WANs or creating strange VPN connectivity to be able to reach the secure web gateway, right? I personally take it a step further in the definition of secure web gateway does not include things like the firewall and the IPS. If I am creating a configuration and the network where my entire network is nothing more than a lot of SD-WAN devices, all connecting to one central secure web gateway, be it in the cloud or wherever it is, and that is my point of access to the internet, that becomes also my point of attack for the most part from the internet. And therefore, in my opinion, that device should also have IPS, firewall, and every other known technology to protect my network, because most likely those attacks are going to come from there. I'm going to start doing NAT statements there. I'm going to start doing all kinds of other things there. I'm getting technical, and we try not to be too technical here. But the point to make is there is going to be your door to the internet. You can't just say it's just a proxy. Right? It needs to be a full and complete device, my opinion.
You know, Pierluigi, one of the interesting things that really just triggered in my mind listening to you is, if I'm a small business owner or I'm the CEO of a company and I'm thinking this through and I'm watching this episode, I kind of want to say, what's in it for me? And as I'll attempt to answer that question based on what I see on this slide here. And the easiest place for me to start is to say, this does almost everything that you need to do from a security perspective,
yes.
Whether you're accessing the general internet, websites, if you're interacting with software as a service, or if you're remote and you're interacting with private applications that live in your data center. The combination of these capabilities will cover you in all of those instances. And there's actually an attack path that's a little more insidious, and maybe it's more of a data leakage path, would be cloud to cloud connectors that your IT teams will have very little visibility over. SASE can help you with that as well. So that's a very insidious thing. I would say the biggest aha moment that hopefully people are having right now is there's something major that's missing, and that's email security. So if we think about email filtering and things of that is not part of SASE. There are tons and tons of point-driven solutions in the world of information security that can be replaced with SASE. But your email security gateway is not one of them.
No. If I maybe a clarification is not right. SASE is not necessarily for everybody, right? So if you don't have an office, maybe the secure web gateway with the software on your workstation to force you to connect to it is sufficient, right? So the solution that I don't call SASE is still valid. I'm not saying that it's not a valid solution. It's not SASE. There are applications for it. If you only have one office, then maybe SASE is not for you either, because all you need is a traditional UTM. You're fine, right? These solutions are for companies with a certain number of people and also a certain number of branches, offices, whatever you want to call them, like your bank. I'm sure you have SASE in your bank because you have, I don't know, 500, 200 branches. I don't know how many branches your bank has. And therefore, you need them connected and protected. The SASE architecture also gives you a one place, central place, where you manage the policies for the entire company. Imagine if in the traditional architecture, you were wanting to deploy one proxy at every branch. You go nuts managing all of them, right? Or in the more traditional way, the MPLS, extremely expensive and not as resilient as the SD-WAN, right? There is a reason why we moved away from because one could make the case of saying, okay, then I'll make my own traditional MPLS, I'll put a firewall there, a proxy, and I'm done, right? Yeah, you can do that. But nowadays, it's obsolete, not because the technology is obsolete, but because it's expensive, whereas SD-WAN, if done properly, will also, in theory, save you a lot of money, right? What we need to be careful in terms of this is that we went with this into the cloud, and today, the cloud has become and this will be a critic to the cloud providers, the cloud is becoming expensive. Too much is being done through and in and on the cloud or with the cloud. Everything has become SaaS. All the traffic goes through the cloud. They make you pay by the network usage. There is none of the cloud providers offer a bulk renting, whatever the term. I can't think of the term right now for usage of network resources. You pay by the byte, and therefore it can be very expensive. So I've seen some clients of ours asking to remove the secure gateway and go back to the traditional UTM on site, because the UTM on site, you don't pay by the byte, you pay the ISP once a month and you're done, right? So there is we need to be careful, because this is a wonderful architecture, works really well. But the trend that I'm seeing with the cloud providers is the raising prices for many reasons. Some people say because of AI, that's increasing the cost of data centers. And this is causing the users like us to have to say, well, maybe now what used to be a good use case to go to the cloud, now it becomes a good use case to come back in-house.
So I think what you guys are saying is super interesting. What I have seen in the implementation of this solution, and I love that Pierluigi is putting this in front of us, is because one of the biggest problems I have is that everyone defines these things in a different way. And I evaluated for us to use one of these products, and I evaluate 4 platforms, and the 4 of them do different things. And the 4 of them, they will not do even the core things. So that's sometimes something that for the owners that they have.
You should evaluate the network box.
Sorry?
You should evaluate the network box. I have to say that.
Yeah,
I had to say that.
So the problem that we have is sometimes when we discuss this technology or this way of presenting solutions, is every vendor is doing whatever they want with the definition. So I love that we start with this, because at the end, not everyone is going to offer the same level of service. And then there's a lot of overlap. So I will give you an example. I was talking with one of these guys, and we're talking about HTTPS encryption and decryption, right? Mm-hmm. Today we know that that's all the traffic that we see probably is that. And we were talking about SASE, and they tell me, oh, our product doesn't do that. And I'm like, okay, so you don't do that? No, but we do CASB. I said, no, you don't do CASB, because to do CASB, you need to be able to do the HTTPS encryption. Yeah. And I said, oh, no, you're right, we don't do CASB. So even in those conversations, you start asking questions on the technical aspects, where you will find out that these solutions will tell you that they do some things, but they don't. So this is one of the solutions with some of the vendors, which I agree with Pierluigi that Zero Trust is not a solution, that they will tell you that they do things that actually they don't. So this is one of those products that you have to pay a lot of attention and have very good deep conversations about what the vendor is offering you and what is not. And in the overlapping, my concern is that sometimes you may have a next generation AV, which is doing, for example, the HTTPS inspection, or you may have in an inline CASB that the firewall is doing. So now how the SASE is going to work with that is something that you have to pay attention, because when you put those 2 things to work together, you may have some operational problems, right?
There's also the reason why Gartner recommends using one vendor, because then you don't have those problems. The vendor, yes. In theory, if it's a vendor, like would have already resolved those problems, you do whatever needs to be done at the level where it's the most appropriate.
Yeah, but even in the same vendors, and and I'm not going to give names, they have the same products in different solutions. So there is going to be overlap, and you have to be careful with that overlap from a technology perspective. Now, on the network side, one thing I will tell you is that I think that the wins that you get for the optimization of traffic that you can configure in a SASE product is something at the endpoint level that you normally don't see in other places, right? Yes, if you have SD1, you can implement, but let's remember, SD1 normally is at the edge of the network, right? You cannot do that at the endpoint level, right? So if that person is not, sitting behind where that device can make the traffic decisions, that doesn't happen. So the consolidation of the policies that you guys were talking a second ago, to me, is one of the huge wins of this solution from a network perspective. The last comment I have, because I have to discuss the internal teams and MSP, this is a very massive amount of change if you are not using, and the product can do a lot for you. So, and I will give you an example which I feel very passionate, which is CASB. CASB is a great alternative, right? I don't have a lot of clients which actually are leveraging CASB, and they have licenses and they can do it and all that. That requires change management, requires how to implement that, and to simplify what CASB can do. To give a super simple example, you can tell CASB to do things like, for example, you can allow people to get to Google Drive, but you may not allow them to upload files to Google Drive. They can download, but they maybe not to upload. So you can restrict in some of these SaaS applications what you can do with the CASB product. And some of them, they have DLP. So you can create DLP rules with.
I have to ask, wasn't this something that we were already doing for years in the firewalls? Our product has done this for 20 years.
Correct, but when that device is not behind the firewall, and that's called inline CASB. This CASB is on the endpoint level, right? So if we have someone in an airport or in a hotel or something like that.
That's why you need the software. You need the software on the PC for the connection.
Exactly.
However, what is not necessary, there are two different ways of doing that, right? You can put the software that can only connect to the secure gateway, or you can force a VPN that's always on.
But you're backhauling traffic there, right? So you're sending all the traffic to your, and that's one of the, that's another difference now that you said that I noticed from these solutions, guys, is one question that you should ask when you're evaluating SASE is how many pods you have. Because one of the problems, I evaluate one vendor, no lying, that they have 2 pods in the United States. That's it. One in some place in the West and some place in the East. So imagine that the user experience of that person is not going to be very good, when they have to get to whatever service they need. So the backhauling of the traffic is something to consider. You're right. If you are backhauling your traffic to your data center, in the past, all the security stack will apply. But again, the user experience, I'm not sure it was going to be that great.
Having many pods, the way you are talking, I was looking at the map of the data centers for public cloud in the US. There are a lot of them, but not as many as you might desire. So it's not even that easy to deploy as many. AWS. Sorry.
No, I cut you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pierre.
No, AWS, for example, only has 4 main regions with the 2 or 3 sub-regions, like Houston is a sub-region of Virginia, right? So if you want to use AWS and you're in the middle of the US, you don't have much of a choice. You have to hop on the Google or the Oracle or the AWS or the Azure. If you're in Arizona, there is only Azure, and so this becomes more of a choice of the company that's providing the SASE, and in a way, the size of the company, because not everybody can afford to have a POP everywhere. Right? Smaller companies may be a disadvantage in this case.
Agree.
But I do agree. When you're connected. You want something that responds fast, that doesn't have 80 milliseconds of latency. But we're getting too technical. We're trying to talk to business owners. So the real issue here is, how do you force people to be connected and not to just browse randomly and freely with your work computer? And there are 2 ways that I'm not aware of. One is the specific software for the SASE, and one is an always-on VPN, which at the end of the day do the same thing, practically.
Well, there's an interesting benefit too of SD-WAN as it steers network traffic through a SASE implementation. Because remember, we're taking a lot of that network security concept and we're shifting it and placing it into the cloud. There are a number of devices that are on internal networks where you cannot put a sensor or an agent on that device.
Yeah.
So by having SD-WAN take that traffic that's going out to the internet and steering it into a SASE environment, you now have much greater visibility into those devices. It could be a postage meter. It could be some sort of a time card, punch clock. There's so many things in our environments that are networked these days that you're actually going to get great visibility into what your vendors are doing behind your back. And if some of those IoT type devices were to become compromised, you're going to be able to see that inside of SASE through that visibility. So there's a huge use case that business owners need to consider that previously it's been a blind spot for a lot of people.
Which there are some software vendors that I do not want to mention that sell the concept of software-based SD-WAN. Now, software-based SD-WAN means that you're installing software on every machine, and you are just connecting yourself to the ISP router. And so my question was to them is exactly the first question was, okay, what about all the devices where I cannot install this? Right? They're not protected. They're not part of the SD-WAN anymore. You're not doing an SD-WAN. This is an SD-WAN. This is just collecting the HTTPS traffic from the workstations and sending it to a secure web gateway. But that's not the concept of SASE. SASE is a much wider concept that it has to encompass the entire network, because your attacks are not coming only on the workstations.
Knowing that this, Pierluigi, knowing that this has so much change management and it can be a complex set of services to deploy, what are our thoughts on, if I'm a business owner, I need to expect my internal team to be able to chew on this and get it done, or maybe I have a managed provider that gets that done. What are we looking at, Andy, from that perspective? What do we expect out of those groups?
So I think that some of the things that we're saying are critical, right? So first of all, you need to start looking at about functionality and features, because every vendor decides that this is a different thing. I will start with actually what Pierluigi shared, that is, okay, this is the things that I should be getting from a solution perspective. So first of all, have a clear understanding of what you want to achieve with the solution, and then what do you want to get, because you have to be evaluating the features. That will be the first question. The second question is, what is the business case? I will tell you that we have clients that they say, I want to replace my firewall, or I have clients that it tells me I want to do, all remote people. There's going to be different business case where you are going to have to purchase different things from the solutions. These solutions, they normally have, I have seen three flavors. The first flavor is, I will protect your internet traffic. They call it whatever, but that's the concept. I will protect your internet traffic somehow. The second flavor is the replacement for the VPN, which is another license, right? And then the third flavor is, I will give you a high availability node for you to use for IPsec static IPs. And that's another different solution, right? So normally those three things, they will have different costs of implementation, and they will get you closer to the full implementation of SASE, but you need to understand your business case about what you need and what you're buying to be able to select the right products at the right price.
So can I buy those separately though? Like, I know we talk about SASE as almost a lift and shift, because if I'm a business owner, I'm thinking, I don't have all of my products on the same renewal cycle, and I don't want to pay for the same thing twice.
Yeah, you're right. But so what happened is, and this is something I have seen, is not everyone is using VPN today, right? They have something else that they have been using. So you are not going to buy the SASE product for VPN or the replacement for the VPN if you don't need that, right? You may be using a CTNA product, which gives you the functionality that normally the SASE product will need. And then the conversation starts, as you were saying, what do you do at renewal? Do I introduce that as an alternative and replacement? But again, one concern I've seen is there's a lot of overlap. So you have to be careful, because in the overlap, of course, people overspend money. And the simplification that, for example, and I'm going to vouch for Pierluigi. Pierluigi has the firewall, has the SASE product. That simplifies a lot the implementation of these, for example, right? Because you have one vendor, one platform, one security profile that you have to manage for all the overall solution. So this is something that normally IT professionals, in my experience, they don't have a lot of exposure if they have not used it. The security teams are more used for the features. They will understand what is a CASB, what is the HTTPS encryption and decryption. But the IT teams, when they start seeing, I can manage now with business rules my traffic, that's something that they were never able to do, right? As Pierluigi was saying, MPLS will never give you that alternative. So I think that to me, that part of the business will have to grow a little bit more in understanding how SASE manages.
I know there's different companies that offer different ways of doing this, or maybe in tiers, right? And then maybe if I'm allowed 2 seconds to talk about us, the reason why we don't is because our opinion is always that security is not something you choose in piecemeal. You choose the package that will protect you, period. Like, imagine if I gave you email security and you told me, I don't want anti-phishing because I'm never going to get phished. right? Or whatever, choose another feature, right? The most typical is anti-spoofing. Oh, I can identify spoofing, I don't care about it. And then they fall for the spoofing very easily, right? We don't offer that in pieces because the client, especially in the small and medium business, the client is not fully aware of what they're getting into. And so our opinion is we know what you need. And you need it all, period. You cannot tell me you don't need tunnels or you don't need that, and then tomorrow you need them, and then you don't need to ever do a NAT, and then tomorrow you need it, and then you have to jump through hoops. I've had the clients that have had the SD1 with other companies and the security with us, and then they had to do a NAT statement locally, and they couldn't do it, right? Because their devices didn't allow it, and we had to jump through hoops to do these things in the cloud. There is a lot of complications when you mix things and when you don't get the complete solution, in my opinion. Doesn't have to be more expensive, right? It's just more complete. This is not a place for me to advertise our stuff. It's just that we are comparing. Obviously, mine is what I know, but I've seen others and I've seen the comparisons. And there is a situation where I don't feel that you should allow the client to choose only pieces because the client doesn't know what they're choosing. It's not addressed. They know that they need 3 pieces. It's security. They're coming to us for us to tell them what. And unfortunately, it's the nature of humans. Somebody is going to try to sell them something they don't need. It's just going to happen, right? The reason why 3 of us are in this conversation is because we're trying to tell these business owners what do they really need, right? What is, in our opinion, that they really need, right?
Yeah, I know that, I know we're at time and we need to wrap things up. I just know that if I were running my own small or medium-sized business, this is a product I would definitely be putting into the portfolio. And the timing is beautiful right now because people are entering into their budget season. So I would encourage everybody to explore this, develop use cases, work with the right consulting firms or MSPs to get yourself in a better position than you're at today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pierluigi to wrap things up for us.
Well, publish this podcast on LinkedIn. We also have a YouTube account. You can find us at cyberhouston.org, where you will find a link to this recording. We hope that we have brought you some useful information. As always, we try to make things simple for business owners that are not security experts, so that you can hopefully be able to make decisions based on what you actually need and not what the crowd and the noise in the market is trying to sell you. And we hope it will be useful and you will come back to listen to us next time. Thank you so much.